Winning Blueprint presents.
In the lab room.
Welcome. You are in the lab room. I'm your host, Lou. Thank you for joining me. It's Monday, and yesterday was the last week, week 17 of the National Football League, which means today is Black Monday. For those of you who don't know what that means, it's the day after the last game of the regular season. So the off season, the first day of the off season for all of those teams who did not make the postseason. Every year there's 20 of them. And on Black Monday, that's the day that franchises go ahead and determine whether they're going to fire their coach. For most teams, that's the time when they go ahead and fire a lamed up coach. A coach that you've already probably known was going to get fired. And sometimes we get a few surprises, but Black Monday is the day that a lot of football teams in the National Football League decide to give their coaches, their head coaches, their pink slips. And they start to embark on a search for a new head coach. The sooner you get rid of your coach, the sooner you can start your search for your new head coach or your new GM. And so Black Monday is that grim, dark day in the National Football League that sees coaches, personnel, staff be let go. And that's why it's Black Monday, because it's a dark, grim day. It's really not a fun time in the National Football League, especially for a coach who knows it's coming. It's been looming for a while. If you're an Andy Reid, if you're a North Turner, you know this has been coming. It's been on the horizon for a while, and now it's going to come to fruition. It's Black Monday, the day after the end of the last regular season game in the National Football League for the 2012 season. And so for some coaches, it's a brand new start, because maybe you just needed to get out of your last coaching situation. Maybe it was time to go. Sometimes it's just time to go. And we'll talk about Black Monday and all these coaches. We'll talk about that on Tuesday. You know, Monday is a day heavy with a lot of what just transpired over the weekend and all the games. And so we're going to focus more on that and the playoff scenarios and what the playoff picture looks like, because it's done. Now we know who's going to the playoffs for each conference, what 6 teams are going where, who's doing what. We know all the specifics now. So let's get into that today. Focus on that. Go over the weekend that was and go ahead and fast forward into the postseason, and let's talk about what this wrap-up of Week 17 meant, what it means moving forward in terms of the playoffs, and where teams go from there. So let's go and get into the weekend that was and go Slate Skatin.
The weekend
that was.
with Slate Skatin, with Slate Skatin, with Slate Skatin, with Slate Skatin.
Week 17 of the National Football League for me was less about teams playing against each other that really had nothing on the line. It was less about just games itself and more about the teams actually trying to win. That was my focus in Week 17. The teams that were actually trying to win. Because I felt like a lot of teams actually went out and tried to win and lost. And they made it to the postseason, and that's damaging to your psyche. When you try to win and you don't, they would have been better suited just say, hey, we don't care about this game. Put in some reserves. And if you lose, you can say, hey, we didn't play all our players. But when you actually play all of your players, you try to win and you lose, that is never good. And so my focus in Week 17 was more about the teams that were playoff contending teams, teams that are in the postseason, that wanted to win, that tried to win, and lost. So let's get into the weekend that was and go slate skating and talk about those games and all the games on the slate in Week 17. You start in Atlanta, and this is one of the games I'm referring to. Probably the one that jumps out at you the most. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers traveled to Atlanta to take on the Falcons, and this was a game that I thought the Buccaneers would win because I thought that the Falcons had absolutely nothing to play for. I thought Matt Ryan and Roddy White and Julio Jones and Tony Gonzalez, these guys might see a quarter, maybe a half, and that would be it. They treat this like a glorified preseason game. That's what I thought. I was wrong. And I watched this game, and I was surprised. And a lot of people were criticizing Mike Smith because guys got injured. Among them, John Abraham. Looks like he has a serious ankle or knee injury, and so his ability to play in that divisional round playoff game when the Falcons will be playing their first postseason game of 2012, we don't know what his availability would be. And so a lot of things can be taken from this game, but the one, I forget all about that because as a head coach, your first priority and objective in every game that you play is to win. So I can't fault him for wanting to win. And he's taking a lesson from the Green Bay Packers of last year that saw the Packers rest their starters in Week 17 against the Lions in a meaningless game, then get a bye week, then have 2 basically weeks off without playing against another team, come up against the Giants and lose because they were out of sync. He didn't want his team to be that way, so he played them in the whole game. But that's one thing. Okay, fine, you played them. This is a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that has struggled of late. Haven't been able to win football games. As a matter of fact, they've lost 4 straight. And for you to come into this game, they've lost 5 straight. Take that back. This is a Tampa Bay Buccaneers team that's struggling, that has lost 5 straight. And for you to play all of your starters, you're at home, you haven't lost at home all season long, for you to play your starters and not be able to get it done against a team in the division at home, a place you haven't lost all season long, when you're playing all of your guys for the duration of the game, that speaks volumes. And that, to me, was probably one of the worst losses in Week 17 because there's no justification for it. There's no built-in excuse. There's no, hey, I wanted to take a look at a few guys, or, hey, I didn't want to get any guys hurt. I wanted to get some guys some rest, or I needed to get some of my guys out of there. There was none of that in this game. Mike Smith played to win. All of his guys played all 4 quarters, except for guys with really bad injuries that really needed the rest. For the most part, their whole squad played in this game, and they weren't able to beat Tampa Bay. Now, they ended this game with a full complement of timeouts. If you're really trying to win, at the end, you'll do everything you can, exhaust all your timeouts, exhaust all your options. They didn't do that. But they played this game straight up, and they lost. Kudos to Tampa Bay for getting it done. I still have questions about Josh Freeman. Is he the guy for the job in Tampa Bay? And it seems like Greg Schiano is asking himself that same question, as he's already said that there will be a competition for that quarterback job next season because Josh Freeman was sporadic this season. He was up, he was down. But they won this game. And Doug Martin continues to be a revelation for this team. They went back into the first round to go get Doug Martin, and he's paying dividends for this team. He looks like a very good running back in this league for years to come. Doug Martin shined in this game, helped Tampa Bay win this football game, and they got it done 22-17 against the Atlanta Falcons. Buccaneers finished the season 7-9. Meanwhile, the Falcons, this stings. Now you go into the postseason 13-3. That's fine. But now you have a loss at home, and you lost your final game of the season playing all of your starters. So now there's no invincibility factor at home. You lost at home. You lost at the Georgia Dome. And so don't know where the Falcons go from here. Look, it was a meaningless game, but you wanted it. You played to win, and you lost. That's not good. And so we'll see what the Falcons do from here. They got a week to recuperate, lick their wounds, have guys on the mend, get their game plan together, and come out firing against whoever they have to face in their first game of the postseason in the divisional round. We'll see what they're able to do if they're able to rebound, but this was not a good loss by the Atlanta Falcons. I tell you that much. So the next game up on the slate featured the New York Jets traveling to Buffalo to cap off their seasons. Both of these teams not going to the postseason. Both of these teams are relatively bad football teams with changes looming. And as we now know, it's Monday, Black Monday, so we know what changes will occur in New York as Mike Tannenbaum is out as GM. Rex Ryan will be retained as head coach. For now, we will see if anything happens with him, but you would think if they were going to get rid of him, they would have did those two as a package deal. So looks like Rex Ryan will stick around as Jets head coach for at least one more season. Meanwhile, the Buffalo Bills, they fired Chan Gailey. They've got some shuffling going around in their front office. No one else was fired, but guys are moving around and positions are being assumed in that front office. And you knew Chan Gailey had an outside shot of being fired. I hinted at this about a month ago, but I wasn't sure. I didn't know where the Bills brass stood in terms of Chan Gailey and how they felt about the lack of steps forward by this franchise. I mean, the Bills seem like they've been running in place for about 3 years now. And I felt like Chan Gailey was a big part of the reason why. And so he was given his pink slip. He was given his walking papers. So he's one of the coaches that didn't make it out of Black Monday. But on the field in Week 17, it wasn't much to see here. This was one of those, hey, move on, not much to see here games. Jets are a bad team. They put Mark Sanchez back out there. He's a bad quarterback. They didn't do anything on offense, which is what they've done all season. Nothing on offense. So the Bills were able to take advantage of the Jets. They win the game running away 28-9. Bills finish up the season at 6-10. Meanwhile, the Jets finish up the season at 6-10. And these are two bad football teams looking to right the ship in 2013. They'll be moving in different directions, and we'll see where their offseason takes these two franchises as they try to help build their franchises back to respectability in the AFC East division. You look at the next matchup, the Jacksonville Jaguars traveled to Tennessee to take on the Titans. Again, two teams looking to wrap up their seasons, not going to the postseason, two bad ball clubs. You weren't sure about either one of these coaches keeping their jobs. Jacksonville, maybe not so much. They just hired their head coach last year. It was not a splash hiring. A lot of people really weren't that enamored with the hire. I know I wasn't. When they announced that they were going to hire Mike Mularkey, I really didn't do much for me. Didn't move the needle for me one way or the other. Meanwhile, the Tennessee Titans, they struggled this season. And I don't know what they were expecting in Tennessee. Again, if they wanted to win more games, you play Matthew Hasselbeck. Instead, you went with the young guy. You went with the young fella, Jake Locker. You get those kind of results. You get mixed results. You get a mixed bag because he's a young guy, has a lot of learning to do and a lot of growing to do at the quarterback position. So I don't know what they were expecting, but I wasn't sure if Mike Munchak was going to make it. Thus far, he has made it. Don't be surprised, however, though, if in a month, in 3 weeks, in 2 weeks, he's fired as well. I think he'll be retained. I think he will keep his job, and I think he deserves another shot. Because if everyone was on board for playing Jake Locker, you had to know that your season was going to turn out 6-10, 7-9, 8-8, somewhere in that vicinity. You had to know you weren't going to just go out and start winning football games immediately. Jake Locker isn't that good. And I don't know what they think, but I'm telling you, he's not that good. So, this game on the field, however, in Week 17, the Jacksonville Jaguars did what they have been doing all season long. It's funny because bad teams, they show themselves. Week after week after week, they show you why they are, in this case, 2-14, 3-13, 4-12, 5-11. They show you why they are what they are. And the Jacksonville Jaguars showed you why they are what they are in this game. They gave up 4 returns in this game, whether it was a fumble, an interception, a kickoff, a punt. They gave it up in this game. You can't win like that in this league. And that's what the Jaguars have been all year, a disappointment. And they disappointed again in this game. They lose 38-20. Tennessee gets the win. They moved to 6-10 on the season. Meanwhile, the Jacksonville Jaguars finish up at 2-14, and they'll be looking to do some damage in the draft. They need help. They should draft a quarterback. They probably won't. They'll probably give Blaine Gabbert another shot at the helm, and we'll see what that lands them. I'm thinking putting him back at the quarterback position will have them in this very spot next year, looking at a high draft pick, and probably next year finally deciding that we need to move on and get a quarterback. You look at the next matchup on the slate. The Cleveland Browns traveled to Pittsburgh to take on the Steelers. No playoff implications here. Two teams wrapping up their season again. Neither one of these teams going to the postseason. More surprising for the Steelers than the Browns. We're used to the Browns not playing in the postseason. Meanwhile, the Pittsburgh Steelers are usually a triple P. But every 3 seasons, there's a Steelers jinx that says the Steelers don't make the postseason. And once again, it came to fruition. I'm not one big on jinxes or curses or things of that nature, but when you see it happen this often, you got to think that something's up. And the Steelers, once again, didn't get it done this season. They got the win, though. They went in. Ben Roethlisberger tossed 3 touchdown passes. The Browns played a slew of guys. There was a who's who, or lack thereof, on the Browns roster on the field against the Steelers. They lost the game. They had Thaddeus something. There was a lot of no-name guys out there for the Browns. They gave it an effort. They gave it a run, but they fell short against the Pittsburgh Steelers in this game. 24-10. Steelers get the win. Steelers go to 8-8 on the season. Browns drop to 5-11. And I think that was a successful season for the Cleveland Browns. They don't seem to think so, however, because they fired their head coach, Pat Shermer, and their GM, Tom Heckert. So they're starting over, but you had to know that change was going to come in Cleveland. There was an ownership change, so you knew change was looming in Cleveland. And so it's a trickle-down effect. In the National Football League, there's a trickle-down effect. You get new ownership. That new owner wants his own GM. That new GM is going to want his own head coach. So forth and so forth. So you knew the new management that came in, that bought the Browns, was going to want his own GM. And you knew that Tom Heckert was in trouble. And if Tom Heckert was in trouble, that means his guy was in trouble, which meant Pat Shermer was going to have to go. So Browns cleaned house. They're going to start anew next season. They have a lot of talent, a lot of young pieces to work with. We'll see what they do, what direction they decide to go in as far as the coach is concerned. And meanwhile, the Steelers, they just need to saddle it back up, get on their horse, and give it a go next season. Nothing changes in Pittsburgh. They're the same organization. They just didn't get it done down the stretch, which is unusual for them, but it happens. We move on. The next game on the slate, as we continue down the slate of games in the weekend that was, sees us travel to Cincinnati as the Bengals hosted the Baltimore Ravens. This was a meaningless game. The Bengals, they already knew they were going to be the 6th seed in the AFC playoffs. So they played their quarterback and a lot of their starters for about 1 quarter. The defense hung around for about 3 quarters. A lot of them for 3.5 quarters. But the offense, a lot of their skill guys, they were done after the 1st quarter. Meanwhile, the Ravens, they did have something to play for. They didn't know if the Patriots were going to lose and if they would have had a shot at the 3 seed. But really, why do you want the 3 seed? Yeah, it's nice if you find a way to get to the Patriots in the championship game and you have to play against them and you would be home if you were the 3 seed. But who's thinking that far ahead? 1 game at a time. And if you're the 4 seed, you get the Colts at home. To me, the Colts are the weakest seed in the AFC playoffs. Why would you want to play anybody else? So, for the Ravens, it was about getting healthy. Anquan Bolden was missing in action. You don't want Joe Flacco going down with an injury. Terrell Suggs. A lot of guys. Ray Lewis. No one played. No reason for them to risk injury. Their starting unit was gone by halftime. And so, this was a game that was just played by a lot of backups. Tyrod Taylor got in the game. Bruce Gradkowski for the Cincinnati Bengals got in. And they went at it. Bengals were victorious, 23-17. They got the win. Both teams finished the season at 10-6. Both teams are in the postseason. Ravens will be your 4 seed. They will be hosting the Colts in Wild Card Weekend. Meanwhile, the Cincinnati Bengals will be traveling to Houston to take on the Texans, and we'll talk about why that is occurring later on in the program. But both teams finish up the season at 10-6, and there you have it. So we move on to the next game on the slate. The Chicago Bears are in a win and I need help situation. They traveled to Detroit to take on the Lions. The Lions had a chance to slam the door on the Chicago Bears in their season. The Lions, they're in the house. They're not going anywhere for the winter. They're snuggled in tight. They're not going anywhere. Right now, they're alone in the NFC North house. Packers are out. The Vikings are looking to leave. And the Bears are trying to leave. But they have some say-so. They can't stop the Packers. They can't stop the Vikings from leaving. But they can stop the Bears from walking out of that door. All they have to do is win at home. But as I've said time and time again, bad teams reveal themselves over and over and over again as to why it is they're bad. And the Lions did it again in this game. They turned it over 4 times, and I told you that the Bears need all the help that they can get. And the Bears weren't going to score a lot of points in this game if not for the Lions turning it over. But the Lions turned it over 4 times. The Bears didn't, and the Bears won. And they had to eke it out, but again, when you're playing a bad team, you find a way to beat them. That's just the name of the game. That's the way it goes. And the Bears were able to get away with a 26-24 victory over the Lions to finish up at 10-6. Meanwhile, the Lions finished the season up at 4-12. Calvin Johnson was not able to reach his milestone of 2,000 yards receiving in the season. He fell short by about 36 yards maybe. Doesn't matter. The Lions were a train wreck of a team this season. Matthew Stafford did set a record, though. Most passing attempts for a quarterback in a single season with over 700 attempts. That's insane, but that's what the Lions do. They throw the football way too often, and that's what happens when you're behind all the time. But back to the Chicago Bears. They've done this to themselves. They didn't have a chance to make the postseason by virtue of another team winning later on in the slate of games, and we'll get to that a little bit later. But because of them not making the postseason, Lovie Smith was a casualty. He was fired on Black Monday. That was probably the only firing that I didn't see coming. But I can't say that it's unwarranted. How many years can the Bears underachieve? How many years can the Bears have 7 wins or more after 10 games and still not make the postseason? It's unacceptable. Last year, there was a built-in excuse. Jay Cutler went down. Matt Forte went down. You were banged up. There was no number 1 receiver out wide. The offensive line was in shambles. Your offensive coordinator wasn't getting it done. Yada, yada, yada. This year, not so much. The offense is intact for the most part. Guys aren't really getting it done offensively. The defense is doing their part. The offense isn't holding up their end of the bargain. And so you had to know some change was going to come eventually, and it came in the form of Lovie Smith being shown the door. And so now the Bears will be searching for a new head coach. And we'll see where their search takes them and who is the next head coach of the Chicago Bears. Bears finished the season at 10-6. Lions finished the season at 4-12. So the Houston Texans traveled to Indianapolis to take on the Colts. We knew the Colts were going to be emotional. Their head coach, Chuck Pagano, was on the sidelines for the first time since finding out he had a treatable form of leukemia in the first month of the season. And so you knew they were going to try to play and win. But the Texans had a lot riding on this game. The Colts didn't. They knew they were going to be the 5 seed in the AFC. They were playing for nothing but pride in this game. Meanwhile, the Texans had it all on the line. They had home field throughout the AFC playoffs. They had a first-round bye. They had their whole season, what they've worked towards all season long, on the line. And they blew it. They went to Indianapolis and were outplayed, slapped around. I'm worried about this Texas team. I said it a week ago. I said it, and I said it first on my program. They're going to lose. I have no confidence in Houston. I said if they aren't the number 1 seed, they don't get a first-round bye. At this point, their mental state, their psyche, it's shot. They're not a team with confidence right now going into the postseason. And You were wire to wire, or at least wire to week 17. The #1 seed in the AFC. You played well enough to be called the #1 seed in the AFC all season long, and you waited till the last week of the season to blow it. I don't know where that leaves this team. I can't see them doing any damage in the AFC playoffs. In fact, I see them losing. This is the reason why they're playing Cincinnati in the first week of the postseason and wildcard weekend, because they didn't get it done in week 17 on the road against Indianapolis. And I honestly would have loved to have seen them play this Indianapolis team earlier in the season to have this division really come down to the wire, because I would have loved to have seen Indianapolis have a chance to win this division. But they played them too late, and Houston had done so much damage early on that they had built an insurmountable lead in that division and were able to just hold on for dear life, because they struggled down the stretch, losing 3 out of their last 4. They're going to lose against Cincinnati, but that's for another segment. They lose this game. They drop to 12-4 on the season due to the Houston Texans. Meanwhile, the Indianapolis Colts get the win, and they finish up the season 11-5. Hey, how about that? The Indianapolis Colts, a 2-win team from a season ago, used their first overall pick on Andrew Luck, the quarterback out of Stanford. And who knew? They bring in a new quarterback. They change their staff around, get a new coach, get a whole bunch of new energy in that building, and they win 11 games, and they're going to the postseason. This Indianapolis Colts team is dangerous. Now, will they make it out of the first round of the playoffs? That remains to be seen, but I tell you one thing. Don't sleep on the Indianapolis Colts. This is a good, solid football team that has matured and sped up the rate of becoming a solid football team by leap years. I don't think they have the pieces for a 3-4 defense completely right now. Doesn't matter. They're playing their tails off, and they got it done, and now they're going into the postseason with an abundance of confidence as they beat the Houston Texans, take their record to 11-5. The Baltimore Ravens will have their hands full at the hands of the Indianapolis Colts. You look at the next matchup, and this was the best game of all of the afternoon games, 1 o'clock and 4 o'clock. The Green Bay Packers traveled to Minnesota to take on the Vikings, and this was another game of teams who wanted to win, who were trying to win in Week 17. The Texans were trying to win, and they lost. The Falcons were trying to win, and they lost. The Packers were trying to win. They needed to win. They wanted a first-round bye. They wanted the #2 seed in the NFC playoffs. They needed a win to secure that. A loss would make them the 3 seed with a San Francisco 49ers win, and you knew the San Francisco 49ers were going to beat the Arizona Cardinals. So a win was paramount for the Green Bay Packers if they wanted to hold on to that 2 seed. But they had to go against a Vikings team that was playing for their postseason lives. A win, and they were in. A loss, they go home. Simple. The Bears took care of business at 1 o'clock. So at 4 o'clock, the Vikings already knew what was at stake. We have to win to go to the postseason, or else the Bears will be taking our spot. And so, the Vikings came out, and Adrian Peterson was chasing history. I told you I didn't think he was going to get it, but I did not think he would fall 9 yards short. I did not think he would come anywhere near that close. I said, yeah, 171 yards, a couple of touchdowns. Christian Ponder doesn't turn it over. They can win this game. But I did not see him eclipsing 200 yards in this game and really threatening Eric Dickerson's record. But he came dangerously close. Eric Dickerson was sweating bullets down the stretch. And if this game goes to overtime, you can forget about your record. But luckily enough for Eric Dickerson and the Minnesota Vikings, this game didn't need overtime as Blair Walsh knocked down the field goal at the end to give the Vikings the win. This was a great game. Packers were on their heels from the start to the finish of this game, but they gave it a run. But they lose to the Vikings 37-34. Adrian Peterson was a man possessed, and the Packers, they weren't able to tame, and this is something that they're going to have to do because these teams will meet again in the postseason. But they weren't able to tame Christian Ponder. You got to force Christian Ponder to make mistakes. And they didn't force him to make mistakes. In fact, he played a flawless game. He had a passer rating up over 100. He didn't make the critical mistake. He threw a couple of touchdown passes. He was sharp in his game, and when they needed him the most, he stepped up and made big plays in this game. They won the game. And it was a team effort. And now this same Minnesota Vikings team who just scratched and clawed their way into the postseason has a date with this Green Bay Packers team that they just beat to get in. And now the Packers, who have given up over 400 yards rushing to Adrian Peterson, have to deal with this Minnesota Vikings team again and Adrian Peterson again. And they want no part of Adrian Peterson at this point. They just want the Vikings to go home and never see them again. Well, they blew that opportunity. Now they have to play the Vikings again. And I tell you what, if they can't stop Adrian Peterson, if he runs wild on them again, and Christian Ponder this time in Lambeau doesn't make the same mistakes that he made the first time around, the Green Bay Packers could be in some trouble. They could be in some serious trouble. We'll see. It remains to be seen what will happen, but the Vikings get it done. They go to 10-6 on the season, and they make the postseason through the Minnesota Vikings, knocking off the Green Bay Packers, who lose the 2 seed, who lose the first round bye, who have to play in wild card weekend as the 3rd seed now, and fall to 11-5 on the season as they fall to the Minnesota Vikings. And that's going to be a compelling matchup in wild card weekend. We'll get to that at some other point, but what a game this was. Very entertaining, very thrilling finish. Vikings get it done. So we move on. Patriots needing a win. They needed to get a Texans loss and a Broncos loss to achieve the first overall seed in the AFC. Just a Texans loss would get them a first round bye. Texans lost, so now all the Patriots had to do was win. Texans lost at 1 o'clock, 28-16 to the Colts. So all the Patriots needed to do was beat the Dolphins at home, and they were your 2 seed, and they would be getting a first round bye. We knew they were going to take care of business. The Dolphins, they were a nice story. Winning 7 games this season, really to me overachieving with the lack of talent that they have. They got it done this season. They won 7 games, but they weren't going into Foxborough and beating the New England Patriots. It just wasn't going to happen. And the Patriots made sure of it. They blanked the Miami Dolphins 28-0. Secure that 2nd seed in the AFC in a first round bye as they finish up the season with a 12-4 mark through the Patriots. Meanwhile, the Dolphins finish up 7-9. Ryan Tannehill had a successful rookie campaign, looking to build on that in the near future. The Dolphins have some pieces that they can build around, but they need a lot more talent on that roster. They'll look to do that through the draft and free agency and things of that nature, and we'll see what the Dolphins do moving forward. You look at the next game on the slate. The Carolina Panthers traveled to New Orleans to take on the Saints. This game was surprising to me. Thought the Saints were playing good football to finish up the season. They had just learned that Sean Payton would be back. They signed an extension with Sean Payton, and he'll be their coach for next year and many more years to come as he signed a 5-year deal. So you're thinking there's a lot going on in New Orleans, and there's a lot of good energy going their way. They just won 2 straight. They scored 75 points over the last 2 victories. You're thinking they're going to go home, finish off the season strong at 8-8, and really look to come back and be a powerhouse in the NFC South next year. No. No. The defense, who looked like they were starting to forge some kind of backbone, they fell apart. They fell to shambles in this game as they allowed D'Angelo Williams to run for over 200 yards on them in this football game. And for me, for the Panthers, you ask yourself, why weren't you using D'Angelo Williams more this season? I've asked that question many a times. Haven't really received an answer, but he was the answer in this game as the Panthers find a way to score 44 points in this game and beat the New Orleans Saints 38-44. Panthers finish off the season playing some solid football. Winners of 4 straight through the Panthers, and they finish up the season at 7-9. And so they got something they're building in Carolina. Will Ron Rivera be there to see it through? He was not fired on Black Monday, but I tell you what, he's not out of the woods yet. There is a change going to occur in Carolina. They're going to have a new GM come in here shortly, and so you got to know that if Jerry Richardson and the ownership group in Carolina isn't backing Ron Rivera, and they tell the GM, hey, it's your call, Ron Rivera might not be around to see this thing through. But if the GM comes in and wants to give Rivera a shot, He's going to have one opportunity and one opportunity only to have this Carolina Panthers team in the postseason next year, or he'll be gone too. But the Panthers get it done in this game. They win 44-38. The Saints, surprising loss. I didn't see this one coming. Didn't see them giving up the amount of points that they gave up. They scored 38. They did their job offensively. I just didn't see them giving up the amount of points that they did and losing this game. Nonetheless, they finish up the season at 7-9 as well, and now Sean Payton will be back in the fold. We'll see what the Saints look like next season. The next game up on the slate sees the Philadelphia Eagles traveling to New York to take on the Giants. This one was a laugher. The Giants were up 21-0, probably 7, 8, maybe 9 minutes into the first quarter. And this game wasn't even close. The Eagles caught the Giants with the element of surprise by trying an onside kick and getting it to open the game up. And what does Vic and the Eagles do? Michael Vick starts this game because Nicholas Foles has broken his hand. And what does Vic do? He picks up right where he left off in the turnover department. Throws an interception. Stevie Brown, who's been Mr. Everything for this Giants defense, picks his 8th pass of the season off, runs it deep into Eagles territory, and let the scoring begin. Eli Manning was sharp in this game, finding different receivers, throwing touchdown passes left and right. They destroyed the Eagles in this game, and again, bad teams showing that they're bad repeatedly. The Eagles failed to even have any resistance in this game. They lose 42-7. Giants get the win, but they couldn't make the postseason because they needed too much help. They needed 3 teams to lose. And in this day and age, when you need that much help to get in the postseason, it's highly unlikely that it will happen. And the Giants had every opportunity to get themselves into the postseason. They squandered them. They go home. They finish up the season 9-7. And that's not good enough. It's not good enough to get in the postseason. The Bears won, which eliminated the Giants immediately. The Vikings ended up winning. That would have eliminated the Giants as well. And so they didn't need to go anywhere. You had opportunities down the stretch. You needed to win, and you were in, and you lost, and so you need to go home. And the Giants are going home. They don't have a chance at defending their Super Bowl championship from a year ago. They finish up the season 9-7. And they send Andy Reid out with a bang in Philadelphia, a loud, resounding bang, shot out of a cannon bang. He's done in Philadelphia. He was fired on Monday. We knew that was coming. It's been looming for a long time now. And he'll get another job. I really think that Andy Reid needs to sit down for a year, take a year off. He's had the death of his son and a lot of issues with his family. He just needs to take a year off. But I think that Andy Reid's one of those guys that needs football as a solace. It's something that gives him a peace of mind. Without football, there's no Andy Reid. Football gives him a reason to live, a reason to be. And so I don't think he'll be able to sit still. He'll get back into the coaching ranks, and someone will give him a job. Andy Reid is a good head coach. And if he gets in the right circumstance with the right franchise, he might be able to do some big things. So we'll see where Andy Reid ends up, but he won't be in Philadelphia next year as the Eagles lose 42-7, finish up the season at 4-12. And this was the worst season for the Eagles in a long time. And they'll be looking for a new head coach to send this franchise in a different direction next season. You look at the next matchup. This was a bad game. Bad game between two bad teams who are going in two different directions. The Oakland Raiders traveled to San Diego to take on the Chargers. We knew North Turner and A.J. Smith were going to be canned. That was an understatement. If you thought that they had a chance, you were fooling yourself and you were flat out wrong. Both of them were going to be fired. We knew this. So the Chargers won one final game for North Turner and A.J. Smith as they beat the Oakland Raiders 24-21. The Raiders started Terrell Pryor in this game. Not much to see, not much to talk about. He wasn't terrible. He wasn't overly impressive. He did throw 2 touchdown passes, but the offense looked pedestrian with him at the helm. Again, there's going to be changes for both of these franchises moving forward. The Raiders, they canned a lot of their staff, including offensive coordinator Greg Knapp. They'll be looking to change things in Oakland. Meanwhile, A.J. Smith is out as GM. North Turner is out as head coach in San Diego. They'll be starting anew. And I told you, there's going to be a brand new feeling in San Diego, and it is well needed. Time for them to turn the page in San Diego. They're going to do so. Chargers finish up the season at 7-9. Raiders finish up the season at 4-12. Both of these franchises will look different next year, and they need to look different. The Raiders need a new identity on offense. Their offense wasn't good this season. The defense wasn't that bad. The offense wasn't good. Meanwhile, in San Diego, they need to turn the page. The Norv Turner era needs to be finished in San Diego. It is done. AJ Smith, his era needs to be done. They need to start over, start anew, and see what they can do in San Diego. The next game on the slate, the Kansas City Chiefs travel to Denver to take on the Broncos. This was basically an offering by the NFL gods to the Denver Broncos. Offering of the first overall seed in the AFC playoffs. Just win against the lifeless Kansas City Chiefs, and you'll be the #1 seed. Easy enough. Broncos did their job. They disposed of a very bad team, 38-3. They get the #1 seed because Houston lost. And so the Broncos are one of the most dangerous teams, if not the most dangerous team, going into the postseason, riding an 11-game winning streak. They secure home field throughout in the AFC playoffs, and they get the first round bye. This is a dangerous club. Meanwhile, the flip of that coin is the Kansas City Chiefs. And they fired Romeo Crennel. I really didn't want to see him go. They retained Scott Pioli. And the word on the street is, if you put your ear to the pavement, you'll hear that all along Scott Pioli wanted Kirk Ferentz, the head coach of the Iowa Hawkeyes, in college football. And so they're going to target Kirk Ferentz and see if they can get him to come right up the street from Iowa to Kansas City and be the coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. And so Pioli gets another shot. Crennel doesn't. And I actually thought that Romeo, if given a quarterback, might have been a solid coach because the defense, which is Romeo's specialty, wasn't that bad. But Romeo, at times this season as the head coach of the Chiefs, didn't have a clue. And so you knew there was a great possibility that he wouldn't be retained as the head coach. He got his pink slip today. He will no longer be the coach of the Kansas City Chiefs. He'll land on his feet somewhere. He's a great defensive coordinator. He can coach up X's and O's on the defensive side of football. Someone will give him a job as a defensive coordinator, and he'll be good at it. But the Chiefs finish up the season at 2-14. They're your #1 overall drafter in the NFL draft for the 2013 season. So congratulations to the Chiefs because they need it. They need a quarterback. They need to figure out who the best quarterback is coming out in the upcoming draft. Select him, move on, because they need a quarterback and they need one in the worst way. Broncos finish up the season at 13-3. They're your #1 seed in the AFC playoffs. We'll see who they draw in the divisional round of the postseason as they go riding into the postseason on their Bronco with an 11-game winning streak. They're a dangerous football team right now, led by Peyton Manning, who might be the MVP of this season. What a remarkable story. Peyton Manning has been lights out this year, and the Broncos are a dangerous ball club. Look at the Arizona Cardinals traveling to San Francisco to take on the 49ers. Another team that tried to win, but they won. But it wasn't pretty. The 49ers struggled with the Arizona Cardinals at home. This game was close for way too long. The Cardinals are a bad team without any direction, no quarterback. The 49ers were supposed to stomp this team. Instead, they let them hang around. David Akers struggled, missed a couple more field goals. They're looking to bring in some more kickers to kind of push David Akers. That's the one thing you don't want going into the postseason. Question marks with your kicker. You never know when you'll need to kick a game-winning field goal. And they don't have any confidence in David Akers right now. David Akers doesn't have confidence in David Akers right now. And so that's a problem that they'll need to address moving forward. But they get the win 27-13, but it wasn't pretty. It wasn't dominant. This 49ers team, who will be your #2 seed, they did get the bye because the Green Bay Packers weren't able to beat the Minnesota Vikings. So they'll get the bye week. They need that bye week. They need to figure out what it is they can do to be a dominant team. Defensively, they're good, but they're not dominant. They don't scare you defensively anymore. Offensively, they're athletic. They pose problems. But they got a young quarterback in there, and so he's going to make mistakes. There's going to be hiccups sometimes. That was the right move for the future in putting Colin Kaepernick in as your starter. But for this year, I don't know if that was the right move, and we'll see as the postseason draws near. Did they make the right decision? We'll find out. But the 49ers win this game 27-13, finish up the season at 12-3-1, get the 2 seed in the NFC, finish up with that first round bye, and we'll see what they do moving forward. Meanwhile, the Arizona Cardinals, they fired Ken Whisenhunt. They fired their GM, Rod Graves. They cleaned house. And I thought that Ken Whisenhunt deserved another shot because I think that he's a great head coach that really didn't have a shot because he didn't have a quarterback in Arizona. When he had Kurt Warner, he had this team in a position to compete every single season. When Kurt Warner moved on, he was back in that same position that he was in before Kurt Warner got there, which was, I need a quarterback. He didn't have one, so he loses his job. He'll get another job because he's a good head coach. But there'll be a new GM, there'll be a new head coach in Arizona, and we'll see what the Cardinals decide to do, what direction they try to go, offensive or defensive minded in terms of a head coach, where they try to go GM-wise, and we'll see what happens for the Arizona Cardinals moving forward. But they finish up the season at 5-11, do the Arizona Cardinals. And what a bad team they were offensively this season. What a joke they were on the offensive side of the football. You look at the St. Louis Rams traveling to Seattle to take on the Seattle Seahawks. And look, the Rams gave it a valiant effort in this game. They really hung tough with the Seattle Seahawks. But as everyone else that has come into Seattle this season, they tried, but they failed to get a win at CenturyLink Field. The Seahawks remain perfect at home, the only team in the National Football League to be able to lay claim to a perfect record at home as they finish up the season 8-0 at home. But it wasn't easy. And the Rams, they know something about this Seattle Seahawks team. Of late, the Seahawks have been steamrolling everyone. Not the St. Louis Rams. The Rams beat them in St. Louis earlier in the season, forcing Russell Wilson to probably his worst day as a pro to this point. And they come back for an encore, not able to confuse him and make him make the mistakes that he made in the first game, but really bogged down this Seattle Seahawks offense and really gave themselves a chance to win this game, but they fell short. They're just not better than the Seahawks, and the Seahawks are a tough team to beat at home. Seahawks were able to get it done, 20-13, but they needed a late score at the end of the game just to win it, 20-13, to finish the season 11-5. They're your 5 seed in the NFC, are the Seattle Seahawks, but this was a tough one for them. And if I'm facing the Seattle Seahawks in the playoffs, I want to see what the Rams did defensively because I need to put a little bit of that into my game plan because the Rams were really the only team down the stretch that slowed this Seattle Seahawks team down. And so be interesting to see if the Washington Redskins, who will be facing the Seattle Seahawks team, implement a little bit of what the Rams did defensively to slow this team down because they've been an offensive juggernaut of late. But they weren't in this game. But they got it done. They go to 11-5. Meanwhile, the Rams, they lose this game, but they finish up the season at 7-8-1. And I tell you what, this was a very successful season by the Rams standards. And you really couldn't have got off to a better start if you're Jeff Fisher. Maybe making it to the postseason would have been a little bit better, but who saw you winning 7 games this season? Who saw you beating the 49ers on one occasion and tying them on another? Who saw you being that competitive this season this fast? You got a lot out of that team when most coaches would have probably only been able to squeeze out 4, maybe 5 victories. Jeff Fisher is a great head coach, and the Rams will be a team that you have to look out for. If they can keep Sam Bradford upright, continue to develop their talent out wide at receiver, and get that offensive line kind of stabilized, they'll be a team that you have to look out for in the near future. But they fall to 7-8-1 on the season, but they gave it a valiant effort against the Seahawks. They just fell short. And that is your Week 17 review. That is your slate skating for Week 17, the weekend that was. And it was a great season that culminated in 12 teams making the postseason. And let me toss it up. There's a touchdown. Let me throw it up. I'm going to tack on this quick extra point. And those 12 teams are in the AFC, your 1 seed, the Denver Broncos, your 2 seed, the New England Patriots, your 3 seed, the Houston Texans, your 4 seed, the Baltimore Ravens, your 5 seed, the Indianapolis Colts, and rounding out the field in the AFC, your 6 seed, the Cincinnati Bengals. You look at the NFC, your 1 seed will be the Atlanta Falcons. Your 2 seed will be the San Francisco 49ers. Your 3 seed will be the Green Bay Packers. Your 4 seed will be the Washington Redskins. Your 5 seed will be the Seattle Seahawks. And your 6 seed, rounding out the field in the NFC, will be the Minnesota Vikings. Those are your 12 playoff participants. Now, this is the first time that I can remember, and it may have happened before, but this is exactly why I thought that the Redskins needed to win the NFC East. For the first time that I can remember, and I don't know if this has ever happened before, and if it has, it's been a while. This is the first time that every playoff participant, both conferences, all 12 teams, have double-digit wins going into the postseason. Every single team in the postseason has won at least 10 games. And that's why I couldn't allow the 9-7 Cowboys to sneak in the back door. The 9-7 Giants to sneak in the back door. You can't win 10 games. You don't need to go to the show. You don't need to get a ticket. And so your matchups look like this in Wild Card Weekend. The Baltimore Ravens will be hosting the Indianapolis Colts. That'll be your early game on Sunday. Your other matchup in the AFC will be the Houston Texans hosting the Cincinnati Bengals. That will be your early game on Saturday. Your 4:30 matchup on Saturday, just like it was last year. In the NFC, your 2 matchups for Wild Card Weekend are as such. The 4 seed, the Washington Redskins, will be hosting the 5 seed, Seattle Seahawks, on Sunday. That's going to be your late game on Sunday afternoon at 4:30. Meanwhile, your primetime matchup on Saturday night will be the Green Bay Packers, your 3 seed, hosting the 6 seed Minnesota Vikings and Adrian Peterson. That is going to be a lot of fun to watch. That's going to be a dandy because the Packers don't want any more of Adrian Peterson. They thought they had washed their hands clean of Adrian Peterson, only to find out, him again? Yeah, him again. You had a chance to get rid of him. Now he's back. Now you got to find a way to stop him from getting 200 yards rushing. Good luck. So that's going to do it for the program. It's been a lot of fun. Again, that's your Week 17. That's your NFL regular season for the 2012-2013 season. It's been a lot of fun. And long show on Monday. You know how it is. I don't feel like getting into all the specifics. In the lab room is really what you need to know. You type that in on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook. You type it in on my inbox in the lab room at gmail.com. You'll find me. I'm everywhere. In the lab room is what you need to know if you want to track me down. If you want to track me down via my page on YouTube, it's Louis T. But that's going to do it for me. I'll come back tomorrow. We're going to have a long discussion about these head coaches, these GMs, and this coaching carousel, if you will, because there's a lot of coaches turning on this carousel, and even some that wipe their brow because they didn't get a pink slip. They got a yellow slip, but that pink slip could be coming. So we'll come back on Tuesday, on the Tuesday edition of In the Lab Room, and talk about the coaching carousel and Black Monday and the carnage that ensued and the aftermath of that and what will occur. And we'll see what we can get accomplished on Tuesday in the lab room. But that's going to do it for today. I thank you for joining me in the lab room. Want to see you back here, same time, same place. And as always, take care of yourself. Have a good one. See you back here tomorrow when we talk about Black Monday.